latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. BLM Brandon, recently at Operation Push, one of the few places he'll find a friendly audience. I had this to say about, Chicago's status as a sanctuary city inside the sanctuary state that is Illinois, and who the real enemy is.
Not to say that people cannot be upset. I'm just saying that anger was never applied to the 30,000 Ukrainians that the federal government attached hundreds of millions of dollars to so that they could find refuge here in the city of Chicago. But yet, when more melanated individuals were being bussed here, the federal government didn't do anything, and then everybody had a problem with immigration, except for when it comes to those who are being migrated here from Europe. These people are trying to run a scam on us. Our enemy is not Central America. It's not South America. It's not the continent of Africa. Our enemy is white supremacy, and we have to unite in defeating that monster.
Our enemy is white supremacy. It's not South America, not Central America, not Africa, which is, the sort of race hustle you're going to get from a race hustler. Did anybody ever say anything about Central America, South America, Africa being our enemies? No. We said that open borders allows people in this country who shouldn't be in this country to do bad things in this country. That's what we said. That's the position. But he's going to continue to talk all around it because that's what race hustlers like Brandon Johnson do.
The governor of Texas, who sent thousands of brown people all over the country, and no one took their anger out on him. He spent over $200 million to bus people across this country to divide our communities. Why would we allow white supremacy to rear its ugly head to continue to divide our communities? President Joe Biden said the greatest threat to our democracy is white supremacy. To this question around how we invest in people, we have literally spent 20 times the amount on black folks, so much so that I'm under investigation by the Department of Justice because apparently I'm investing too much in black people. They're trying to have it both ways. They want to judge me for investing in black people and then criticize me for investing in indigenous people who are already on this land in the first place. And you want me as a black man to be mad at brown people after what white supremacy is doing? Let's not be tricked or fooled by the individuals that benefit from our division. The Trump administration has literally shifted the largest concentration of wealth into the hands of the ultra-wealthy, and you want me to be mad at poor people? And just for the record, not one migrant got a check from the city of Chicago. In fact, most of the individuals that supported the migrant mission were black-owned businesses.
Yeah. Well, that's all very interesting. Couple things. First of all, if we had, and when we have, people from Eastern Europe, from Ukraine, in this country committing crimes, in this country illegally committing crimes, we'll say the same things about them. We do, actually. So if a headline this week was 2 migrants detained in Chicago gun running, drug sting tied to Venezuelan street gang. If it was instead 2 migrants detained in Chicago gun running, drug sting tied to Ukrainian street gang, we'd have the same reaction. Nice try, though. It's about the behavior, not the country of origin. But nice try. We didn't write any migrants a check. By your own admission, it burned before a House committee, BLM Brandon. You remember that? Remember before the House committee? You put or sort of acquiesced to the numbers that have been reported in the hundreds of millions of dollars, actually probably approaching $1 billion in the city of Chicago, but probably something approximating your budget deficit. But anyway, and it's multi-billions at the state level in Illinois, too. Also no checks, but shelter and medical care, Medicaid coverage. I mean, those turn out to be pricey. So that's real benefits being distributed, financed by other people's money. American citizens being forced to pay for the housing and health care and schooling of people in this country illegally. Those are material benefits. You understand the concept? No, I know you don't. But it's a great jumping off point to have a conversation because he takes such an extreme position and he's so morally indignant about it that sort of opens the door to a matter-of-fact, real-world response that hopefully will get more people thinking a little bit, particularly since most of Chicago does not feel he's doing a particularly bang-up job. They may be more open to rational thought again than they would be if they actually liked the person who was preening on like you just heard. For more on this topic and others, Thomas Weitzel joins us, retired chief of police, formerly chief of police for the village of Riverside. Tom, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, Dan.
The white supremacy thing, white supremacy is the greatest threat. You know, we talk about this quite a bit, but I mean, it's just interesting because, of course, the police force is like the military is one of those things where, despite the racial politics that infects police too, because of the politicians, the civilian authorities. But in terms of the actual conduct on the job, I mean, it's a colorblind job. It's a behavioral job, both in terms of your fellow officers working together and in terms of what you need to do to maintain public safety on the streets.
Yeah, for sure. Some of what I heard the mayor say in your previous tape there is just ridiculous. In fact, it's a blatant lie. There was a national study done by the International Association of Chiefs of Police said over 85% of police calls nationwide are police responding to 911 calls or citizens calling the police. They're not self-initiated. Okay, so they're responding to residents calling them. They're not. It doesn't matter whether you're calling the police because you think somebody is in your backyard because they're Hispanic, white, African American. So they're responding. They're not to make it seem like the police are racist and that they're initially doing self-initiated activity is a blatant lie.
This story, too, I mean, just in terms of what we're dealing with here and what he's trying to distract attention away from, Pritzker, too. These stories, over and over again. 8-time felon on an ankle monitor shot 2 women in what officials called, quote, an incredibly violent crime. Already on GPS ankle monitor for pending felony case, charged with shooting 2 women in North Lawndale. Now faces 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder. I mean, I know everyone deserves a 9th chance, and this one didn't work out so great. But the 2 women in North Lawndale, the victims too. I mean, always talking about the concept of black and white supremacy and so forth. So who speaks for all the black victims like these 2 women? Well, nobody in the power structure in the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois, it seems.
No, they don't. You don't ever see any news media interview victims or victims' families and say that they want more policing or they want better policing or that the officers were doing their job or anything like that. It's all slanted, and this electronic monitoring. All you have to do is follow like CWB Chicago and look at every single week, Dan, and every single week there's a case of a violent act where the offender is either on electronic monitoring, early release, essential movement days, which are ridiculous. I mean, every single week, and there's no appetite in Springfield to do any modifications to the Safety Act. In fact, I don't even see police leadership standing up and saying enough's enough. Like, we need to have some type of modification in this bail system. It just isn't working, despite what you might hear from advocates. Okay, that data is incomplete, and it's not. It doesn't take in the whole state. So to me, it's just outright lies for political gain.
Something else that you've been particularly focused on, the Protect and Serve Act. The violence against police. We've talked quite a bit lately about violence directed at ICE officers, which is a thing. But, of course, we've had some tragic killings of police, the mass shooting in Manhattan, the response to domestic in Kansas City. So those stories, too, need to be amplified in terms of an understanding of what police are up against in some of these urban centers, particularly when the civilian authorities are of the sort of a Brandon Johnson.
Yeah, for sure. Most of the notoriety comes from police officers killed in the line of duty. So far this year, there's been 26, but there's been 196 police officers shot in the line of duty as of yesterday. There's been 44 ambush attacks against officers. And of course, they had these ambushes that just took place in Ohio, Kansas, and, as you spoke earlier, New York. So there's the Protect and Serve Act was actually approved in 2018, but it never got past both houses. But right now, it's being upheld by Senator Cory Booker, who you may know is a Democrat from New Jersey.
Yeah, oh yeah.
He's
him.
on the Senate. He's on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he alone is upholding 5 bills because he publicly stated he wants to force the federal government to give money to sanctuary cities, and he does not like the ICE funding. So he's going to hold up 5 pieces of legislation that affect every law enforcement agency in America, including local. It's both federal law enforcement and local law enforcement, and he will not let it go for a vote, even though both houses passed it bipartisan during police week. So during police week in May, these bills were proposed, and he supported them in May.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's, the Black Lives Matter playbook, and that's what Cory Booker is a part of. There's no question, in addition to just really identitarian politics, because it's the sanctuary cities and states, the Black Lives Matter race hustle that you see Brandon Johnson do as a matter of course. That's all they sort of have at this point. When you talk to police, do you sense that there is there's any sort of turn coming, or are things just going to continue to, in their estimation, sort of slowly deteriorate the way they have been now, despite the fact that we have, crime stats in Chicago and around the country that you've definitely seen a dip in murders, at least, and to some extent shootings in Chicago and around the country. But I mean, these are still particularly violent cities. We mentioned at the outset of the show this attack that occurred in D.C., and it's drawn the attention of President Trump and others because it was a Doge employee who was attacked trying to help a woman who was being carjacked. And then you actually start to look at some of these, like murder per capita rates in a place like D.C. as compared to, Mexico City, some of the other most violent cities on the planet. And D.C. does not compare favorably. So, it's down, and in some categories it's approaching pre-pandemic levels, but we still have this endemic violence in urban centers, and we also have defund the police politicians, despite that, ascendant. I'm talking about Mamdani in New York. I'm talking about this Katie Wilson chick who just took out in a primary the incumbent mayor, who was sort of a move towards the middle previously, compared to the previous mayor that let with the autonomous zones and the siege on Seattle. But now they're trending back in that Katie Wilson, Zoran Mamdani, Brandon Johnson direction. So how do police shake out in that environment?
Yeah, the sentiment from law enforcement, at least my colleagues and people I know and law enforcement officers, is that it's not getting any better, at least through the media and politicians. I mean, I saw Mandani say the other day that, he wanted to like to eliminate certain New York City police units, reduce police force,
Yes.
have less. Yet he just got a bodyguard detail that they've never given a candidate at his level before. And that's easy to say when you have 40 New York City police officers guarding you, right? That's really easy for him to say now. So, but I think the public's sentiment towards police is starting to rise. There was a recent Pew Center survey that's over 64% of American public are favorable for law enforcement, but it also said that politicians and media have not increased. It's actually declined. So, when you're being fed this garbage from our politicians, our elected officials, the media, police officers say, why bother? Honestly, here's what's happening. Dan, they're answering their radio calls. If there's any of your listeners think there's really any proactive policing taking place, self-initiated, why would they do that? They're not doing that. They're answering the calls that are given them.
What about the police?
What do we want?
What about the police and fire unions? I mean, as a political force, Katie Wilson in Seattle, the head of the Transit Riders Union, we know who pushed Brandon Johnson across the finish line, the government unions, SEIU, AFSCME, and the teachers. We know who is pushing Mamdani across the line, the Democrat Socialists of America, Muslims, and the public sector unions. And there's the Venn diagram has a lot of overlap between those three groups too, by the way. So it's the same story that's playing out in all of these urban centers. And, FOP tends to be a little bit more outspoken than the firefighters, but I'm not sure that either organization, either union is properly framing the issues and making the arguments that unfortunately an opposition party that doesn't exist is not making in response to what you have at the leadership level in these communities, in these cities.
Yeah, I don't think the unions are pushing enough, and that includes, FOP, Benevolent Association, includes, even the Chiefs Associations. A lot of times they feel that they don't want to take a side because a lot of chiefs and superintendents are put in their position by their mayors or village presidents, and if they're Democratic, they don't want to, offend that side. If they're on the Republican, they don't do that. So there isn't enough unity. I once mentioned that we should march when I was still active in Riverside. We should hold a protest down in Springfield, and they told me that that's unprofessional for police chiefs to do that, and they voted it down. That stuff's a bunch of baloney. We need to act and need to take a coordinated effort between the unions, the police associations, police chiefs. But I could tell you without a doubt, a lot are afraid to speak out because they just are afraid of losing their job. The only one I would say speaks out most often, Dan, is the Sheriff's Association because they're elected. And then the politicians can't threaten them with their jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, but even that's a good point. But even them, even if that was a sort of a proxy for law enforcement generally, they're not omnipresent and aggressive enough, at least for my taste, given the environment that you're describing.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I can tell you that imagine what this is like. You have an ICE hold, and I ran across this in Riverside. You get an ICE hold. You have that individual in your custody, and you're transporting them to 26 in California, the county jail, and they would not honor that. They wouldn't even take the ICE paperwork from us.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't even take it. So when you drop your prisoner off for either first appearance court or it used to be bond court, they would be, it's like you were giving them a disease, like get that paperwork away. Like we're not allowed to even touch that paperwork here. And they were wanted for some pretty violent crimes, Dan.
Yeah, preventable crime is definitely a big part of the story, both with the Safety Act as well as with our imported friends from other countries. Tom Weitzel, retired chief of police, Village of Riverside. Tom, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great morning.
You too. And Tom joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving MyPillow with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss and your gain. MyPillow is offering the Classic Collection for wholesale prices, only $19.98 for a